It's finally here, Disney's full, official, behind-the-scenes sneak peek of their upcoming live-action adaptation of their own Beauty and the Beast. Yes, that's a lot of qualifiers, and I added one behind the scenes specifically because this is largely shots of the rehearsal, the table read that we've already been teased, concept art, a lot of concept art, and then a few very wide shots of them filming the actual movie. And we're going to go into the details in just a moment, but I think two things are made abundantly clear. Number one, this is not the fantasy barf that live-action Cinderella was. And I mean that in the best possible way. But Kenneth Branagh just barfed up as much fantasy as he could, which everyone couldn't get enough of. I think that's one of the best aspects of that movie. And in fact, that's in large part been the formula, the very successful formula for Disney live action, turning up fantasy to an 11. But they have deviated from that formula, it seems, for this film. And they've gone in a darker, richer direction, which actually makes it feel more literary. It very much feels like an old novel brought to life. Also, old paintings. The original Beauty and the Beast fairy tale was written in the 1740s. And if you were to compare what you see here with paintings of that era or pictures of recreations of what a room would look like at that time, it's very, very authentic, more so than the animated movie, which I think is pretty exciting. But it'll be interesting to see if the fantasy addicts who have powered Disney's live-action fairy tale division will be as enamored. But I think that it fits with the character of Belle and the story because she's so into the arts. She's a reader. Of course, her story would seem like a book brought to life. A very handsome, beautiful book. Now, the other thing that this behind-the-scenes sneak peek makes clear is that the concept art can change dramatically when they get to the actual film. And I'm, of course, referring to that Lumiere and Cogsworth photo that's been making the rounds. But allow me to make my case with some new things for us to look at, and that, of course, is Belle. Yes, this is what everyone's been dying to see. Emma Watson as Belle. They're still, keeping it under wraps largely, but we can start the discussion. Now, as you can see here, this is the concept art for what she would look like. And it's very realistic, not too fantasy. You're going to see that they actually changed this for the movie. Maybe they felt this was too much like way Lily James looked as Cinderella in that film. A little bit too, modern chic, because this looks a lot like, the literary hipster girl at school, right? Which I think is interesting, and I'm curious to see they seem to be taking intellectual approach with this character, making Belle, a real thinker, even more so than she was in the animated movie. But I actually kind of like this look. I think it's super realistic. I think it's very likable. I think it's very relatable to a lot of women. But you can see in this set piece of them filming, if you zoom in here, you can see that the Belle and Gaston are in the middle of having a conversation, and that looks an awful lot like the animated outfit. Very, very close. They kept like a dish rag, it seems to be tucked in there, but that's the most they've deviated from that classic look. And again, I'm not sure which one I like better. But even if they go this close to the original in some ways, with for instance, how Emma Watson looks, and I don't blame them, because as you can see in this table read photo, she can really rock a ponytail. She looks fantastic. So great. And of course, that's a very different look than what they had in the concept art. But, also in this table read, they're having a conversation about a book. And she's like, oh, I see you're reading Lancelot and Guinevere. And he's like, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, thank you very much. And she says, it's still a romance. And he said, I wanted to try something different. And that, of course, is not in the original movie. Also, for those of you who are fans of the musical, it's been made clear by Alan Menken they won't be including any of that additional music or songs that were written for the, even though there will be new songs specifically for this movie. So this is going to have stuff in it. The story will be expanded in ways that are unfamiliar to all, which I think is great. So even if they're a little loyal in some areas where it looks like it just leapt off the, in a more ornate literary way from the animated movie, they're still adding, new layers and new things for us to discover. So it's not, it's not a shot by shot remake, which I think is very encouraging. Also, they have this wonderful, we'll get back to the town. Don't worry, we're coming back to that amazing set. But also they had a really nice photo of Emma Watson recording her songs. So I think it's great that she will indeed be doing her own singing, and we'll see what kind of singing voice she has. She's not rocking the ponytail there, but she looks very likable. All right, so the next thing that we want to look at is, this is very revealing. Now you can see in the foreground, they're clearly rehearsing the Gaston musical number. And Luke Evans' Gaston hair is clearly the result of movie magic, as you shall see shortly. But why this is revealing is the concept art in the background for the inanimate objects in the house, which of course are made animate by this curse. Everyone who works in the house becomes a household object. Although whenever I think of this, it reminds me, we watched Beauty and the Beast in my Spanish class in high school, and one of the guys in my class said, he must have had the population of China working for him. How did so many things come to life? And that has stuck with me when I think of this movie ever since. But let's take a look at these characters up close. As many of us have said, it's disconcerting, all right? But I think that this also might not look this way because so much changes from the other concept art, as you can see with Belle. But I would say that if someone were to say, I'm going to turn you into a teapot, that is disconcerting. So they seem to be going almost a little bit in a horror direction, right? And they've lost a lot of the cute aspects that the original Beauty and the Beast had. But I don't know if they can be maintained. If there are any changes from what we're seeing here, it will probably be to go in the cuter direction, right? Because they have to try and sell this stuff, ideally. And I don't know if anybody would want to buy that Mrs. Potts and Chip. Chip's kind of cute. We'll talk about them in a moment. But yeah, again, very disconcerting. But if they're going to go that direction, if they're going to play up the horror of being turned into a household object, visually, I hope they play it up in the story as well. If you're going to go there, go there. Now, there's Mrs. Potts, who's voiced by Emma Thompson, looking, again, these make sense. Like how would you put a face on the side of a pot, right? It would play into the pattern, a teapot, but it does not look nearly as cute as it did in animation. Chip's kind of adorable. I like that he's using his saucer as a skateboard. I think that's very cute. He's hanging the curve there. He's very good. I guess he has a lot of time to practice. Then you have, this is the wardrobe, Garderobe, which is going to be voiced by Audra McDonald, Broadway legend. Then they have two photos here of Cadenza, who's going to be Stanley Tucci. Now, this is a character that popped up, I believe, in some of the animated sequels, direct to video, but will be new to the original story. I think that Cadenza also looks very cool. It's supposed to be the court composer. It looks very neat the way they're able to create the face there. Like sometimes the face is a pattern. Sometimes, as you can see with the wardrobe or Cadenza, it's built in, like it seems to be back in the wood there. The faces come, sometimes they're built into the inanimate object, and sometimes they're somehow transposed on it. We'll discuss that with Lumiere. That's why I'm bringing that up. And then at the end, of course, you have the Ottoman dog, which everybody remembers very fondly from the animated movie, but again, made slightly more creepy in this illustration. So we'll see how it comes about. Now, the next thing is this very infamous photo of Lumiere and Cogsworth, which at first I was like, as many people said, that can't possibly be accurate because it's, again, so creepy. But maybe it is. Now, I think actually Cogsworth, I can see his face the best, obviously there. Anyone could in a clock face. And he's the cutest. He's the cutest of all of these. He's the most where you're like, that's kind of adorable. And I feel bad that all of his parts are messed up there. It's very, very sad, actually. But with Lumiere, that's what threw me off the most about this at first. Although one of you actually sent me a clip from Once Upon a Time, the ABC Disney show, also Disney, which had Lumiere's face in the flame. So maybe his face is this main flame there, because I don't see anywhere else that it could be. And if that's where his face is, the main top flame there, that would mean that this is supposed to be like his bow tie in the middle, his necktie. And that is less creepy, right? Otherwise, I was like, yes, no face, so bizarre. So that's what I would guess would be the choice there. Again, this is going to be very hard for these characters to emote, but that just, I guess, will make the voice performances all the more crucial. But I do think that Cogsworth is kind of cute. All right, now let's look at the town. This looks great. Now, but this seems to be like Belle's house to me. The only other thing that I would imagine is potentially could be the bookstore, which, she goes, I guess she treats it like a library. But, I think that's the bookstore. Or it could be her house. And if it is her house, it would be unusual for her to live, kind of in town, unless they really want to play up her being a city girl, which I think would be very interesting. But that's a lovely photo. Great. When you see stuff like this, you're like, sure, that's a nice painting, but can we actually do that? And then you're like, yes, we can. Now, we've seen this kind of stuff before. They build the set and then they put the green screen back there to fill it in. Although this is actually built outside. I guess maybe to sometimes have natural light if they want it, but it looks very, very nice. It's a little, again, darker, richer, not too colorful. The flowers, though, the flower market provides wonderful color and actually reminds me of My Fair Lady a little bit. And I'm sure they'll get a lot of cinematic use out of that as well. But the shot here, also, if you see this wide shot, and we're going to pull in the picture from earlier where we saw Belle and Gaston talking, but you can see that they have the classic fountain, where, of course, she does her big musical number and, tries to read to the sheep, as best she can. And I also have some kind of announcement stand there. I'm not quite sure how that'll be used, but in that time period, they would sure have a part of the town where they would make announcements. And you actually saw that used a little bit in the Cinderella movie, even in the town square. But they hardly ever went to town in the Cinderella movie. But of course, they've got whole musical numbers here. And Gaston's Tavern is somewhere in the mix as well. It's very, very beautiful. But you know where they've actually already built this? Disney World at the Fantasyland expansion. They have a whole Beauty and the Beast section. They have, of course, the Be Our Guest restaurant, and they have Gaston's Tavern and a little gift shop, and it's just wonderful. And Gaston actually is there, available for you to do a meet and greet. And they have wonderful comedians playing him, and he has just the best lines. He's able to improv with guests wonderfully. I've actually been to Disney World and took about 15-20 minutes to just stand and watch people meet Gaston because it's so entertaining. The guys they hire do such a good job. And speaking of Gaston, of course, this is the photo of Gaston's Tavern, which also a little devoid of color. If you had Kenneth Branagh doing this Cinderella style, I'm sure there'd be a lot more, trophies on the wall, and it would be a lot more sumptuous and richer in color. And this, again, seems very painterly, very realistic, which is an interesting choice for a movie about a beast, right? But I think this looks very nice. But this reminds me of Gaston's Tavern, and where you can buy a Cinnabon and fruit slices, but you cannot sing Gaston. And I really hope that if this movie is popular enough, they will increase the Gaston experiences that you can have in the Fantasyland and maybe build them in other theme parks. Because I don't understand why I would go to Gaston's Tavern and not be able to have Gaston himself show up and lead us through a round of Gaston. That seems like a no-brainer to me when it comes to theme park experiences. It would be fantastic. But very, very nice. And also it's interesting that, when you think of the Fantasyland, the Fantasyland's a little bit brighter than this, but they're actually pretty close. It's a pretty good approximation. So they can hit the ground running when it comes to promoting the live action Beauty and the Beast. Now, the last thing we want to discuss is our two leading men. We have Gaston here. Again, this could never show up in the movie because it's concept art, but it's very interesting concept art because we've never seen him change his clothes. He has two changes of clothes in the animated movie, but they're very similar. One's his dress outfit, that he wears to propose to Belle, and the other is his hunting outfit. But this isn't a hunting outfit. This is something for a ball, but also it has a breastplate on it like a soldier would wear. And that's an interesting change for Gaston because he's always been portrayed as the hunter, obviously, not only to contrast with the Beast in that manner, right? Hunter, Beast, but also, of course, let's remember that Gaston is supposed to help illustrate that true beauty is on the inside, and something that's beautiful on the outside could be ugly on the inside, right? And I think in that regard, he has some of the most ornate clothing we've seen so far for this movie, and he, of course, is not our leading lady, which I think is great. But with the breastplate, if it's just for show, that would also, I think, be very indicative of Gaston because, he's a lot of talk, but, he's not so good at delivering. Although he's good enough, which makes him a dangerous villain. But Gaston is so much fun. As I said, he's so great at the theme park. He's great in the movie. If Luke Evans can do a good job with him here and is given enough to do, if I were Emma Watson and Dan Stevens, I'd be very nervous he might steal the movie from me. I'd be like, we have to step up our game because we're competing with Gaston. But he looks great. But it is interesting to see him in a different type of costume. And also shorter hair here than he has in the, they give him the traditional ponytail and red coat in the Tavern. So again, this costume, this concept art could, not really enter the discussion at all once we see the stuff for the actual movie. And then finally, this is who he's competing against. If I were LeFou, I'd be like, I wouldn't be too concerned. This guy looks ridiculous. This is very poor. I'm hoping that this is just seen out of context, which is why it looks so bad. I think that, for all the realism that we've just discussed, how this movie is being approached, this adaptation is being approached, this seems very unrealistic. The hair doesn't, the hair seems too poofy. It seems, it doesn't have the literary angst that the rest of the adaptation seems to have. And it's also simply not flattering to Dan Stevens. I'd be like, if I were Dan Stevens or his management, I'd say, I'm sure it looked great on the wig stand, when you were drawing it, but have you seen it on my client? It looks horrible. And it just does, he looks so much better in the table read, right? It just doesn't play off well off of the angularity. I mean, they signed him because of how sexy he was in The Guest. And they seem to have stripped him of all that sexiness, which is kind of crucial for when he turns human. Even in the animated movie, they tried to sex him out as much as they possibly could. So we'll see. I guess he's like a little cherub-like, but I don't think any grown woman would be like, oh, I want a guy that looks like a cherub. Where can I find one of those? So I'm just hoping that, again, this is simply out of context, but it looks not good right here. So that's our sneak peek at the upcoming live-action Beauty and the Beast. Again, so much of this could change and probably will change, and I think we're really going to have to look forward to the next big trailer for the film. But it's very exciting, and I bought the 25th anniversary edition on iTunes so I could look at this midnight last night when it debuted, and I'm planning to watch the movie tonight, which is some of the best advertising they could possibly do for the live-action movie. All right, thanks for going over this with me. I look forward to hearing your reaction down below, and you can check out some more Disney coverage right now.